and you got a ton of experience in a lot of different roles. So really, really curious to know how it came to this.
Yeah, high level, everything I do is to impact 3 billion people worldwide. Very ambitious. So that means run, invest, or advise in 100 plus companies so that they can then have that cascading impact, right? Let's start companies to have a company go solve cancer like my mom passed from 4 years ago. Let's have companies to solve anxiety, depression, race gaps, gender gaps, etc. Right? So that means creating great companies. So that means let's get that necessitates me to build the world's largest investor and founder network. I'm a VC investor and CEO at Rocket Mindset, which is founder and leader upleveling. So at a high level, create all the greatest founders and leaders in the world. Heuristically, say 94% of companies in the United States are between $0 and $5 million. Top 6% of companies are between $5 and $100 million. And you have your 0.1% Google, Apple, et cetera, right? So heuristically, there's not a lot of high quality, high scale founders and leaders. And so what I focus on doing as the bottleneck to impact in the world is creating high scale founders and leaders rapidly. So I rapidly up-level human beings now. So that's my focus there. So, and then there's my whole life, my life experience that has led me up to being able to do that just well. So that's a high level.
Okay. So you level up founders so they can get to that top tier level. How do you do that? What's the process?
Yeah. So it starts with, when you want to create a great founder, to have a great founder, you need a great leader. To have a great leader, you need a great human, right? So how do we create a great human? We start to look at what is the life path for this particular human. What does this human want? And for every human, it's a unique path. Some people, they just want to enjoy life on a farm, literally. There are some people that want to go build a rocket ship and go to Mars. And when you talk to all these different people, you have to understand what somebody really wants. And a lot of people don't know what they want. A lot of people are still in discovery phase in their life. So as soon as we're saying, hey, we have a founder in front of us and we want to up-level them, we have to say, well, let's create a great leader. And to create a great leader, we have to create a great human. And so we actually start, before we start talking about customer acquisition and unit economics and the cool idea that they're working on for the product that's going to change the world or the product lineup that's going to change the world, we actually start with them and say, what do you want out of your life? What is your mode of operation? Do you like to live in Excel sheets? Do you like to interact with people? What do you actually want over the next 2, 5, 10 years of your life? What actually happened as a highlight emotional backstory for you, or non-emotional, maybe just competency-based, because there's the two broad backgrounds. What is your background? What is your current focus or assignment? And what is your future? You look at those 3 data points and you can kind of create a graph for somebody. And then you're going to start to align a lot of other people on that too, right? And if people are in their discovery phase still, then you have to give them prescription on how to dive into their discovery phase. And as I'm answering these questions, I don't know how deep you want me to go. So I'm going to kind of balance between high level and deep and allow you to ask those questions.
Yeah, Jeremy, I'd love you to, it's really interesting. Obviously covered a lot of points there. Can you maybe break down how you arrived at that conclusion, right? Because, there's a lot of information. I'm sure you kind of built it up slowly throughout your experiences, your life experiences, your career experiences over time. Can you maybe talk about your different personal anecdotes, perhaps, that led you to kind of building this framework?
Yep. Yeah. So a lot of people will ask how I got to where I'm a certain level of successful and happy. And I really quickly want to point out, I was not born this way. I was made this way. So I was the DF student. I was full in grades in school. And my mom, a teacher, took me out of school in 7th grade, got me up to A's and B's, put me back into public school, and then where I got A's and B's there, so it wasn't just mom giving me A's and B's, right? She built up my competence-confidence loop, which I now teach to founders and leaders, competence-confidence loop. I work with 60-year-old, 58-year-old people that are still dealing with imposter syndrome or not competent, don't have a competent confidence loop that they're working with, right? So 7th grade was the key point. Then I had been, after a while, I had been CTO for 5 years at a company. I had managed people, could talk technology and business all day long. But at 27 years old, when I had left Arizona, went up to San Diego, where I've been for the last 6 years, since 27, now I'm 33. At 27 years old, I could talk business and technology, but you take me out to hang out with some friends, new friends in town would invite me out, and I couldn't say more than a sentence to them. I couldn't talk normally to people. So, and it took me going out with people for an hour or two, not saying anything, where people would ask me, are you okay? Are you okay? And I didn't realize at 27 years old, after managing people, that I needed to talk. A basic human fundamentals I was still failing on. So then I had developed I used my algorithm mindset, because I was a former algorithm writer, a former programmer. I used my algorithm mindset to create a social algorithm. How do I make a conversation last 15 minutes? 30 minutes, an hour, 5 hours, 36 hours. And then that led me to being able to manage teams of people, relating to lots of different people, which now also bakes into one of the top things I will advise for founders and leaders if they want to be really, really good, is being able to communicate and relate to a lot of different people. Be able to go and have conversations with people from different countries, cultures, age groups, education levels, income levels, politics sides, everything. And that's what I do. I'm talking to 5 to 10 people on a video chat like this a day, 3 to 5 countries a day. And this is what I prescribe to founders and leaders to be the best. This is one of your top skills, is to be able to communicate and relate to a lot of different people. So that point of me building that social algorithm, going from super nerd to super social, was bullet point number 2 of a really impactful point in my life.
Right. You talk about, you used to be a programmer, right? And you then took that kind of programmatic way of thinking and breaking things down into step-by-step methods to human communication. And that's something that, James and I, we do that quite a lot on this podcast as well. We have conversations, 1-hour conversations, 2-hour conversations with various guests, various backgrounds, various nationalities. What is the algorithm then? Like, how do you think about that? Because you come from a position where you weren't a good social communicator and you became one. So what sort of formulaic approach do you apply to that? Because I can't 100% relate, because I've always been very extroverted, always been quite talkative, find it quite natural and easy to speak to people. It's never been an issue for me personally. I think James is the same, but from the perspective of not having had those skills innately, how did you build them? And what is the formula? For anyone listening that's not necessarily like a social butterfly, what is the formula that you have, the algorithm?
Yeah. So when I was looking at how do I say more than a sentence, right? Because like in those beginning conversations, I was very naive in a sense where I was like, why do people even talk more than just like, tell me that you got, and this was my mindset then, and this is again at 27 years old. I was like, if you got a house, tell me you got a house. If you got a job, tell me you got a job. If you got married, you got married. Why are we talking about the weather? Why are we talking about the food? Why are we talking about TV shows? Like, if you want to talk about a TV show, go watch a TV show. Like, this was my thought processes at that time. After I had been CTO and managing people, right? It's like I should have been able to, right? But I could talk about tech and business. So I had to say, okay, so how, when you're outside of tech and business domain, at that time, that was my perspective, how outside of tech and business domain, or something that I deemed important at the time, would I just go and talk about like food and culture and whatever? And I had to analyze, and I was like, okay, people are talking about food. Okay, so to talk about food, for example, right? I had to actually just be like, okay, well, I would have to, like, algorithmically, I would be like, okay, well, I'd have to eat a lot of food, right? Experience a lot of different food to where I could talk about, and I'm thinking variables like, okay, why are people talking about this? Why are people talking about the flavor of this, or this type of culture food, or this is really good, right? And the same thing for TV shows, right? Breaking it down into variables, because that's what my algorithm mind does, right? So TV shows, why it's funny, why it's not, why it's good, what are storylines, then talking about weather. Why is some weather better than another weather? Like, why do people even talk about weather? Is it actually important about weather, or is that just like the intro of conversations? Okay, now there's the intro part of conversations where people are just talking stuff that doesn't really matter, but it's getting started, because you don't want to talk about deep stuff right when you're walking up to a dinner table. You actually want to wait till you're like 15 minutes in before you start talking deep stuff. So you start breaking out story structure. Then you start talking about, well, why did we just go for an hour or two talking about basically nothing for, like, say, a bar chat, right? But then sometimes maybe on a camping trip, you actually get into more deep stuff. And then when you get into deep stuff, what is deep stuff? What is a life journey? And why are these so many different life journeys? And what causes a life journey? And then you dive into, a childhood trauma, or some sort of life experience of having 5 bad girlfriends or boyfriends back to back makes you, it's going to be a little more traumatizing. Or having bad experiences with managers makes you hate a 9-to-5 and make you want to be entrepreneurial, versus somebody else who got really good manager lineups, is now in a VP or C-suite position and has been doing that for 20 years and they love it, right? So all of that, I had to analyzing conversations from the most deep to the most short or brief or surface level conversations, and analyzing that variable by variable, and just saying, how do I make this conversation last longer? And then why are we talking about this? And when I did that for every little detail, then I started getting into, okay, some of these conversations that are just going in circles, I don't actually want to be in these. I wanted to get into more deep stuff. And so I went into a more deep, impactful life. And I loved more of diving into the why behind people. And then I started making different persona types essentially in my head of like, okay, there's 14 different types of people, and I'm making up that number right now. There's 14 different types of people. This type of person is very driven and ambitious. This person is not. Why? What creates that? Usually an emotional story creates that. So again, high level, because I don't know how this podcast will work. So
No, that's fine. I think it's quite interesting. So you're basically saying that in order to become better with people, you decided that I need more life experience. I need to know why. I need to know what it is that's interesting about these things that people want to talk about. Use the example of food. People talk about food. People are talking about the intricacies of Southeast Asian food. I'm fairly and not very well acquainted. But then, if I went, tried it for a couple of weeks and tried all different types and flavors and, different restaurants, I'd probably have my own opinion. So is that kind of what you're saying, that, live more, experience more, and then you become a more well-rounded person?
Yep. Live more, experience more, you become a more well-rounded person, and then you can have those conversations. And then I even dove into, okay, then why are we also having conversations when most of life is in feeling, and it's not in thinking or speaking. If you can say snowboarding or feel snowboarding, you can say love or feel love. And so then I started going away from, now I want to make conversations last more, because it started with, I want to make conversations last longer. And I analyzed all of like humanity in a sense for what I could, right? There's still so much more. And then I started saying, I want to live more and not necessarily talk more. So then the optimization metric changed from I want to talk more to now I want to live more, because I actually understood humans more. And I was like, it's not about talking the whole time. And now I don't want to extend conversations. I actually want to stop conversations as much as we can and actually go get into action. And so it led to a different optimization metric.
I see. So then, when you find your founders that you're looking to bring into this kind of top tier of entrepreneurs, what is that sourcing process like? How do you find people? What do you look for in a founder that you can help? Because, some people will probably come out of the box, perfect for entrepreneurship and just go and become the next, Bill Gates or whatever. But like for those founders that are rough around the edge, probably 95% of founders, what do you look for? What are the sort of telltale indicators to you that, hey, these qualities can be refined? What are those qualities?
Yeah. So me as a VC investor, and most investors, a lot of investors are out there fighting to find the next Uber or Airbnb CEO. And my thesis is to create the next Uber or Airbnb CEO, or the next quality CEO, high scale CEO, right? And not to say those are necessarily the high quality, but let's call them high quality, high scale, just because they grew a large company. There's actually still challenges even with people that are at that level, right? So to create them, that's why, right, when you say like 95% of people maybe not necessarily developed fully yet, right? That is the exact thesis, right? Rocket Mindset is the name of the company. And so it's like, let's speed them up quickly. And so I look for seed traits, because not everybody's going to have the full traits that you want, right? Because that would be somebody fully developed. So I use the term seed because it grows into a tree. So seed traits. So there's things like listening, right? If a founder comes and cuts me off during a pitch, when they're pitching to me as an investor, they cut me off by half a second. They're physically not hearing the information, the lens or the perspective that I'm sharing. They're not going to learn. They're not going to grow. They're not going to listen to other investors or customers or employees or partners. And so I don't need the attention when they cut me off. I'm not feeling bad about that. But now they're not investable because they cut you off by half a second. Passion aside, and you can tell the difference, when people are constantly cutting you off or cutting people off, it means they're not investable. It's not going to grow the company. So listening is a really, really important seed trait to be able to listen to everybody else. And that also means not just listening verbally, but listening non-verbally. There are not a lot of people out there. Every conversation I'm in, I'll watch somebody, eye contact, body language, tone of voice, and micro expressions, those four. And when I'm saying a sentence, I can tell if eyes move by a single little bit to seeing, oh, they're thinking, or oh, they're annoyed, or oh, they're angry, or whatever. And I can change my sentence before the sentence even finishes. A lot of people do not do that. They're not listening to nonverbals. Somebody's talking for 5 or 10 sentences straight, and they don't know that they've already lost that other person.
How did you learn how to do that? Because you're saying that you probably weren't able to do this at age 27 as a CTO and, programming all day, cooped up in front of a computer. So how did you actually learn how to do that?
Yeah, so I mean, I definitely wasn't listening to nonverbals before. I was listening to words, and I couldn't communicate to a lot of people. I would miss so much, right? And it started from that conversation algorithm. That conversation algorithm was the key of just starting with that optimization metric of how do I make conversations last more and how do I talk more, which stemmed from people just saying, "Are you okay?" and me realizing I need to talk. I can't be quiet outside with friends for 2 hours. Listen, be active in my head, but not be active out talking, right? So it started with that optimization metric, asking all those deeper questions, and then started diving into, well, how do I make this part better? How do I make this part better? And oh, they're listening. Oh, something was said there, but something else was said there. Oh, it was a nonverbal. And then you dive into the whole nonverbal realm. And then you start reading books on body language. And then you start reading and understanding that. And then you have to start understanding there's different baselines with different people. A smile size on one person is different than a smile size on another person. Everybody has a different baseline of how long they're going to think or think through things, right? And so then I just started analyzing micro details of even the smallest of movements.
Mm-hmm. And was this all purely in the field empirically from your own life, or would you have exercises that you employed, or go to particular places? Like I remember I was speaking to my mother years ago, and she was saying when she was younger, she loved to go to train stations, right? Because you'd see a lot of people interacting. Some people are saying goodbye. Some people are seeing people again for the first time. Some people are nervous before they travel. Some people are excited, like airports as well. So would you have places like that that you would go and go practice this, or is it purely like you would, in every interaction in your life, you'd see it as an opportunity to essentially intellectualize and dissect?
Yeah, every interaction I would see it as an opportunity. So train stations I would watch, airplanes, airports I would watch, interactions on every single video call like this, right? I can always establish new baselines and learn new things and new people. Even watching Instagram and TikTok, every little detail or doing interviews, right, is something that is very, very interesting.
Nice, that's cool, man. So then, what led you into this? Because I know you've done multiple different roles, right? So you're CTO. What else? What else have you done?
Engineering manager, director of technology, director of engineering, CTO, COO, CEO, and now VC investor. And then I did artificial intelligence on a project with the FBI and Secret Service. I built a super website. Those were very early in my career before I got into like manager, director, C-suite roles.
So you worked with the FBI for a project?
On a project in collaboration with the FBI and Secret Service, I did artificial intelligence, yeah.
Love to ask what it's about, but I highly doubt you'll tell us.
Cannot.
Of course. Okay, interesting. So started out as a technology, and then when did you have that sort of impetus to be like, right, I need to become more on the people side? Because what you're doing now is heavily people orientated, right? Because I know a lot, like my background's in technology as well. I'm a programmer, and I know a lot of programmers that, what you described yourself at 27, I know a ton of people like that, man. Like so many people that just fit that exact mold. So what was it internally that you felt that was like, right, I want to become more well-rounded?
Yeah, it was literally that time when I had started that new job out in San Diego, and I started building the conversation algorithm. It came from those questions of, I'm out there with it for an hour or two, multiple times, where new employees invited me out. They were like, "Hey, let's go hang out." I just moved out to this city, San Diego, and people asked me to hang out, and I would go out to the bar or wherever, and they were asking me multiple times, "Are you okay?" And like, I didn't realize, I was like, why are they asking this over and over? And that those questions of "Are you okay?" was asked multiple times by multiple people. And I was like, oh, I need to talk. And so that caused me to be like, I need to talk more. And then I need to become more rounded. And it just cascaded from those simple questions.
Right. Interesting. So what were you doing then in those situations? Were you just kind of sitting there and listening, or were you zoned out thinking about something else?
I was sitting there listening. I was analyzing, processing everything in my head. I was partially also zoning out too, because some of it I was like, this isn't interesting to talk about this TV show. I don't care about the TV show, right? Like I was thinking there's more important things, like, and all my mind was doing was business, technology, and life to the degree that at the time I understood life.
Yeah.
So I was zoning off into other things, or I was listening and analyzing, but then I wasn't talking out loud. And that is what triggered me into being like, I need to be able to talk more. I need to be able to interact more. And then I started seeing the value of another side of humanity that I hadn't seen before. So up until that point of people asking, "Are you okay?" I thought I was fully engaged in the conversations. I was half engaged, like half uninterested. But that's also because I didn't see the value of that type of conversation at that time. And then I got to expand to see the value of that type of conversation. And then also know how to engage more.
So what's interesting is you seem to have approached a lot of it from kind of a personal improvement point of view. But if we tie it back to what you said at the start about trying to find the founders that can make a real difference, right? In terms of advancing the world forward, in terms of some of the words you used around kind of inclusivity and stuff like that. How can you kind of like square that circle for us as well? So was it a point where you were on your self-improvement journey that you realized, okay, I now need to help others out with the skills and knowledge that I've learned and actually add value back to society? Or is it something that's, naturally developed over time?
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I went from like DS student and then into more successful, and then more successful with the social side of things, right? And so me being able to see my growth from not being very smart, not being able to interact with the humanity, and then get really, really good at it was something that created, I can create this in anyone else as well. Then there was the moment as well where when I became super social, I then had a 6-month period, roughly 6-month period, maybe a little bit more, where I went out every single day, snowboarding, skydiving, surfing, game night, dinner night, racing Lamborghini, shooting a machine gun out of a helicopter, going to festivals, doing all these fun things, doing 4-day trips snowboarding with 12 of my friends, renting out an Airbnb in some other state. And there was a point where after a lot of that, all fun, like as an engineer, I'm making more money than all of my friends. I'm having a lot of fun by perspective of what I thought was just a lot. I had all the money I could have, all the attention I could have, all the social I could have. Everything was great. And there was a point where I was snowboarding down a mountain, and we were out of state. And halfway down that mountain, which is a pretty run, you're looking out at this pretty view. You're cruising down on a blue, not necessarily like some hard black. You're just like cruising, right? And halfway down, I was just like, I'm bored. I had built up my skill so much, and I had everything that I could want at that time. And I was like, one, I'm bored, and two, and that was out with friends, and we were snowboarding 4 days straight, and a hot tub at the night, and like games and everything. Like it was really, really fun. But I was like, I'm bored. And then also the second thought was, I'm meant for more. I can do more than just this. And so I had this analogy in my head at that time where I was like, I don't want to be living in a mansion on a hill and the rest of the world is burning. When my mom passes away from cancer, when people are having depression and anxiety, and there's racial challenges and gender challenges in the world, and there's all these different challenges in the world. There's people starving in the world. And I was like, I'm over here having fun and doing all these things. So I think a lot of people also tend to follow this journey is once you have things more or less solved for yourself, and we're all on an infinite journey for growth and infinite journey of desires. And that's a whole other thing we can dive into. So once you're solved in a sense, which is always an infinite thing, you then go to be looking outside yourself. Once you've kind of solved yourself, you then start to look outside yourself and you become impact driven. And so that's where I became impact driven, because you're like, cool, so I have everything and I can get everything, but you kind of look at stuff and you look at a friend who's like going through depression, you're like, this isn't right. Like I want to help you, and then I want to help you. And because you get so skilled at like helping everybody else, then you're like, well, I want to do something bigger. And you want your mind to be engaged and more challenged. And so then you pick bigger goals. Like I'm like, well, let's go after 3 billion people, right? And then now you're on this journey.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I would say I'm naturally a fairly cynical person when it comes to other people. So I kind of look at most people and think you're out for yourself. At least, kind of a guilty till proven innocent kind of mindset, right? What do you think drives people on a fundamental level? Because obviously everyone's different, but I come from my own perspective. I kind of wanted to do things for my own reason when I was younger and try and push, thinking that money makes you happy and this and that. There was a time in my life a few years ago where I basically had enough money to travel freely, to, spend fairly freely as well. And I wasn't satisfied. And even without the constraints of my past life, I probably feel like money is no longer a motivator, like being super wealthy and this and that. I'm still on a bit of a personal journey trying to find out what that is. But I think it is to do with, adding value to the world, doing something that you find both intellectually stimulating and, provides value to other people. Do you feel like most people think that way? Or do you feel like they have to go through that kind of learning experience that both you and I have done to a degree, where you kind of chase experiences and what kind of the poster of success is, come out the other side and then realize, oh, there's more to life than this?
I don't think there's any one path. I think there's a lot of different paths that people can take. Our neurons get coded different ways. I always like to give the camping example of like, somebody goes camping, they get chased by a bear, has bad food. Parents leave them behind. That's a bad experience for camping. Somebody else goes camping, has a great time with friends and family and food and the view and everything else, right? And you say camping to one person's triggered and one person's like triggered a different way, right? Positively versus negatively, right? So even when we have word precision, we have miscommunication. And so how words get coded in our head into neurons and how experiences get coded is how we also develop as people, and that causes different paths, right? So somebody can think that traveling and food is what they want for them, and then they can go and they'll be like, no, I want something more meaningful than this. Well, what is meaningful and purposeful to you? Like we get to define all these things, and a lot of times it is going to be our species is in motion. The world runs, the universe runs on what I would call expansionary theory. The universe is expanding. As we have kids, we're expanding. Financial bank accounts are expanding. Our experiences are expanding. we at a cellular level, we hit dilution rates, right? You get bored of anything that you have over and over. You say I like Wagyu meat over a McDonald's burger, right? You're going to say I love that, but then if you had a 500 days straight, you're probably going to want to puke. If you say you love snowboarding, the 500th day you do snowboarding, you're not going to enjoy it as much as the first day. People growing.
I would say it depends. I would say it depends. Actually, there are definitely things in my life that never wane, no matter how many times I do them. In fact, they probably get more intense the more that I do them. I would argue that it's about each person finding that thing that they're happy to do 500 days in a row. I don't really think that it exists for everyone, but if you can find it, then that's fantastic. And you should probably kind of put all your eggs in that basket.
Yes, I agree. So when I'm breaking things down on a bit of an algorithmic level, the more complex the thing is, the more anti-dilutionary it is. Growing people are anti-dilutionary. So you might be able to find, and you can find those things that for 500 days or for the rest of your life are never going to dilute, right? But at a structural level, if we start to break something down, the more we break it down and then the more we actually do it a lot relative to the other things we're doing, the more it can, in theory, dilute. But the more complex that structure is of that thing, like a person is more, like if I were to have Wagyu every day, right? It's very low structure compared to a person. That will probably dilute after 500 days versus a person might not dilute after 500 days because they have so many more variables of a personality, of travel experiences, of things we can do together, et cetera, right? So when we talk about that thing and when you say that thing, like, yeah, there can be more complex things and things that are growing and changing that increase novelty. But if you look at a cellular level inside of neurons or inside of our bodies, you know that when a cell needs more for its cell, right? It will intake a certain amount, and then at some point it stops, right? And that cellular level is what creates the dilution rates for us at a subconscious level and a conscious level. And then it takes a while for people to realize that we actually run on dilution rates, which actually means we are an expansionary species. And so we ultimately, for life purpose to a degree, is based on we are expanding. So you always want to be expanding, which is why you have to enjoy that journey. You can't just chase the next goal and feel in lack. A lot of people live in lack until they achieve that next goal, right? But it's really about enjoying that journey, and enjoying the journey is said so often, but you just really have to understand that you do. So then if we're all expanding, what we do get to understand is if we're expanding in this train or whatever of life, how fast do we want to expand? Some people move faster than others. Some people go through their experiences faster than others. Some people are slower through their experiences. Some people want to go this direction, that direction. You're always going to be expanding. You're always going to be moving. You're not somehow just going to achieve the house, the guy, the girl, the money, the whatever you want, and then sit there buzzing and like, I'm happy, life is done. Like, that doesn't happen. And people think that. People live their life that way. They're like, once I get these goals, I'm done. I'm happy. It's not going to happen that way. There's people that go into retirement and they want to jump back out of it, right? So we're always going to be expanding. We have to understand difficulty and challenge, like keeping your mind engaged. That is something we want to be diving into the whole time. We want to be like, this is a hard challenge problem right now. Maybe I'm a little bit stressed. I actually want to turn off the stress emotion and just enjoy this thing.
I think, yeah, I would agree with most of that. One thing I find interesting is, James, you mentioned that there's some things you could do continuously every single day, right? That you'd never get tired of. Give us an example. So I can get, knowing you so well, I could probably guess, but give an example of that.
Well, I mean, hitting the gym, right, would be one. Going training, pushing myself physically. I mean, another one could even be reading or learning new things, right? But it goes back to your point. You kind of expanded your point after I said that about adding in levels of complexity and making it, less and less likely to dilute the more you do it. So it makes perfect sense.
Yeah, I think that
one thing is like not just external things, right? It can come from within. So it can be something that you personally are working towards. It doesn't have to be the stake or the other person. It can be something that comes from within. And I find maybe it's the way that my brain is wired, but I find those things to be the things that last longest rather than looking at an external source to bring you satisfaction or happiness.
I think there's a unison in both what you're saying, right? Because, Jeremy, you're talking about we're an expansionary species, so we do things that we can constantly grow and expand. And James, all the examples you just gave, right? The reason why anyone could do them every day is because you're learning something new. You're pushing yourself constantly. It's never like it's like a piece of Wagyu beef and going to the gym or running on the track. They're not the same thing. One of them, as you said, is a completely external piece of external stimulation and satisfaction. The other thing is constant internal growth. So I think, I see your point, Jeremy.
Yeah. And then one of the other things you were saying, James, earlier is, sometimes you might be a little bit, I don't know if this was your word, like negative or towards some other humans. But I think that happens with a lot of people where, when we're interacting with different people, when we get to look and say, you know, that difference is not something maybe I don't like that difference, but I can still say it's a beautiful difference, and I can say maybe it's just not aligned for me. And a lot of times also when we start to rely on people, we can find out that some people in a work or a professional or a personal setting can be unreliable. And that can make us not love interacting with other humans when they're unreliable. And why are they unreliable? Well, maybe we weren't so aligned so much because they didn't understand their life journey yet. They were still in discovery phase. They hadn't gotten into what founders and leaders need to get into is, I've finished a lot of discovery phase. Now I'm really convicted into doing this company, this startup, or this life path. And now I'm going to be consistent. And now the people I'm interacting with on this path, I'm going to be consistent with. And I also understood how to communicate better, how to be a more well-rounded human. And now I can be a great human to other human beings. Whereas a lot of people are still in the evolution phase. And so then they interact with us and then we're like, oh, I don't like human beings. And it's just so hard to find other human beings that have gotten through that well-rounded, great quality. And then to be able to assess them in the first 30 to 60 seconds, like I do, right? And be able to read their eye contact, body language, tone of voice, micro-expressions, understand their empathy, their compassion, and everything else, and be like, cool, this is somebody that's really high quality that I want to interact with and that I want to invest my time in, to where it's not going to be unreliable. And then I really love all the beautiful humans. Like, I think it is very hard to find. Like 99% of humans are still going through all this like very early development stages. And for the people that I'm hanging around that are really, really well developed, it's a really fun and beautiful world. It is still a small percentage, but it's a really fun and beautiful world. And so that is part of why like I want to rapidly up-level people, not just for founders and leaders, but humans at scale, because we make a much more beautiful world. There's a lot of challenges and hard things in the world, but there's also a lot of very, very beautiful things. And I want to expand the percentage of beautiful things and beautiful humans, because there's a lot that we can create in the world. Instead of just analyzing the world, we can create into that world.
People have so much baggage as well, right? I mean, when you're talking about kind of what I may perceive of the world or how I approach people, I being the collective I, so like one, right? You're often holding up a mirror to yourself and your past experiences. So maybe I am negative towards or a bit cynical because I've been through experiences in my past that had led me to be this way, right? And because I think a certain way, I project that onto others, right? And you're absolutely right in saying that a lot of people are still stuck in that phase. For that particular example, what do you think are the triggers for that? Like, what are the common roadblocks for that? So you say you have a person who comes into your program or that you're talking with, even in social circles, and you can see they have quite a cynical outlook on the world. How would you process that? Would you think, okay, this person probably has a lot of baggage from their past. They probably see things in a certain light because of the way they were brought up or stuff that's happened to them. And then on top of that, how would you then go about trying to break down these walls to create these so-called beautiful people?
Yeah. So I start with looking at what incentive do they have? And usually it's like you look at like, why are they even talking to me, right? You have to start with the incentive they do have, because basically the incentive they have is their opening window. That's their opening window, right? If they're incentivized to talk to you or whatever their incentive is, if they, you know, if you're saying I'm traveling the world and they want to go travel with you, whatever their incentive is, right? To talk to you or to hang out with you, you want to start with that, because that is their open channel. And then you want to use that to be able to say, well, based on this thing that you want, whether it's incentivized with me or otherwise, to get more of that, communicating better could be a great thing for you. Listening better could be a great thing for you. And when we get somebody to generally listen more, they're going to absorb more perspectives. And when we get them to listen, then we can start giving them more and more lenses and perspectives and saying, have you thought about how words code you? And how experiences code you, and then we start to give them that like less number one, right? So we got to use the step one, use the incentive and the opening we have. Step two, open more of their openness, right? People have a degree of openness and closeness, and negativity can kind of make you a little bit more closed, or openness can just make you really, really open and usually more positive as well. So we want to start opening the whole. Start with the whole. Step two, get them to focus on that listening and growing in experiences is important. Step three, understand that words and experiences are coded into us, and understand it goes through our five senses and how our five senses will affect how we get coded in the world. And then once you do that, then you can start saying, so now you might understand, either directly or indirectly, they're going to understand, oh, my experiences are coding me. Because initially people aren't thinking that, right? So you have to give people in a certain order and timing. We can't teach people calculus right off the bat, basic math, then calculus. So that's why there's an order. Start with incentive, get them to be listening, then start telling them, you know, when you receive something, how do you think that codes into the neurons in your brain and how that's coded you? Oh, now you're understanding how your childhood experiences caused you to see this. And now you understand that maybe the negative past life experiences are causing you to think this, but there's actually a lot of new experiences you could put yourself in front of, a good human being, a good life work experience, a good life experience, work experience, etc. And you can actually start to see there's more beautiful sides. And then we also start to talk about, as we start to increase, they're like, oh, that's interesting. Oh, that's interesting. And you want to watch for it. Are they following? are they liking any of this, right? You have to be watching that eye contact, body language, tone of voice, micro expressions the whole time that you're kind of up leveling somebody and sharing these lenses of perspective, and that you got to make sure when you're talking to somebody you're not belittling them and you are just saying like, I'm trying to help you out here, and not into like, I'm trying to help you out here like when they don't want it, but like just really really listening to them and understanding what are the words they're using, what is the emotion they're using, and map them in order from that. You can't just come in with a predefined script and say, here's step 1, 2, 3, 4 of how to transform somebody. You have to look at somebody and say, where in this trillion dimensional matrix of the world are you? And then from that point, I'm going to map a unique path from where you are to where you could be. And then I'm also going to share lenses with you of like, you know what? Instead of analyzing the world, you can create the world. So how do we create something better for you? Instead of somebody being a little bit more negative, be like, but you can go create your type of relationship. You can go create your type of life. So become more creation. So there's steps.
You talk maybe about one of your success stories then, some man or woman who you've taken from not irreparable damage, but, a fairly choppy situation, and you managed to turn them into, something a little more productive, and kind of how you measure that as well. Is it quite qualitative, or do you actually have metrics that you track?
Yeah. So I'm doing this. I do weekly calls with a lot of people. I've been doing it over the years, and I have people that I've known over the years. And so there's a lot of people that have started from negative. There's a lot of people that have started from not able to communicate or relate to a lot of other humans. There's a lot of people that have started from not having the money or the success or the happiness or the fulfillment they want. So I'm mentioning different starting value domains or measuring domains or metrics, right? And then for the value domains that they care about, whether it was money or family or life or happiness or whatever, or ability to communicate to other human beings, we then do week over week meetings, and week over week meetings is key. You can't put it all into one conversation, no matter how you do the order. So order matters, and then spacing matters. You have to do it in the right order, and you have to do it in the spacing. I've done it in the right order, all in one conversation, and try to get somebody from understanding nothing about the world to everything, and I can fit it, but it doesn't work. You actually have to take time to actually have people live through the lessons. And so that's why I do weekly meetings with people. And so I have taken people from the very, very early in a lot of those different value domains or measuring metrics, and over weeks and months, I have been able to get them to where they are making a lot more money. They are a lot more happy and fulfilled. They're talking to a lot more people, and in all those different metrics, they have been increased. And so there's just been a lot of those cases. And yeah.
No, awesome. That's really, I mean, well, where do you see this going then? Are you obviously looking to implement some kind of tech angle to it? Obviously, being a programmer in the past, is this currently a kind of one-to-one solution that you do? Is it scalable in that sense? Obviously, you're trying to impact like 3 billion people. What is your roadmap from taking from what sounds like a very kind of intimate setting into actually expanding out and affecting so many people?
Yep. Yeah. So there will be software in the future. And I'm doing a lot of these one-on-one right now, but I'm not just doing the one-on-one mentoring and coaching and life coaching and CEO coaching and all this kind of different levels of coaching, different types of coaching. I'm not just doing it myself. I'm also doing weekly training of other leaders and teaching other people to do the eye contact, body language, tone of voice, micro expressions that I'm reading that I do. So I teach people. I actually get on calls with some of my other leaders that I'm training up and have them analyze the other person the way that I do and be able to read and interact with the other person to where I'm actually duplicating myself. Everything I do is billion scale, 100% billion scale. Everything I do is scalable. So not only am I doing it from a software scalability, but I'm also doing it from the human scalability, because there are still points that you're going to need that human element for. And so I want people to be able to, so I train up a team of leaders on weekly calls where they can be able to understand what is that well-rounded human. How do you create a well-rounded human? How do you talk to all these different people from different education backgrounds, income backgrounds, personalities, cultures, countries, etc. And so I'm training up people to do that. And for the last decade, when I've managed teams of people, I've trained people to train people to train people. And so that chain of training people to train people, and then checking 3 or 4 layers down, oh, did they actually get the right training and didn't mess up on the telephone kind of an issue, right? And they're still doing well. Then I look for that, right? And I teach people to make this an autonomous process. I teach people, well, what are your grading metrics? Your grading metrics are that like somebody who trains somebody way down the line, they still know that they're following the process right when second by second they're watching the conversation. They're making sure that this person is tracking. They're not losing this person. They know that as they're up-leveling a human being, that person is still booking week over week over week, whether they're paying or not paying or whatever. And this person is happy. This person is growing in the value domain that they specified. There is no absolute value domain, because we all create our own meaning, our own purpose in life. We all create everything about our own lives. So whatever metric they identified that they know, to whatever degree they know, because even what they think they want in life is going to change and evolve. But whatever they are pursuing, as long as the person leading or coaching this person through it sees that for what that person that they're coaching has identified that they want, whether it's money, happiness, fulfillment, kids, travel, whatever, and they're improving on social metrics or conversation metrics or whatever, that when they see that that person is improving on their metrics and they keep coming back for more of the coaching, then you know that coaching is done well or that mentoring is done well. And so I'm training up a team of leaders globally. I have a global team of founders and leaders, and investors, and I'm just growing it larger by the day, getting on phone calls like this and scaling it.
It's fantastic, man. I think, this has been a really informative and for me very thought-provoking episode. So Jeremy, listen, James, unless you got any more questions, I just want to say a big thank you. Good luck with your mission to affect the 3 billion people. Hope you make it happen and make more complete human beings around the world. But thanks so much. And all the best.
Thank you, Siraj.
Thanks, Jeremy.
James.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Take care of yourself.